Hey guys, my name is Dan and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to show you how I made Tidmouth Station. This N-scale LEGO Tidmouth Station took several months to design and build and is made up of over 15,000 pieces. This is the second large-scale build in the LEGO Sodor project, a series where I recreate iconic locations from the classic series of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends in LEGO. Everything is built at a size compatible with N-scale to go along with both Bachmann's current N-scale Thomas line and Tomix's old N-scale Thomas line. In the last episode, we looked at my Knapford Harbor, and you guys seemed to really enjoy that video, so I decided to make the next build even bigger and even better. And the set that I chose for this next big project was Tidmouth Station. But why did I choose to build Tidmouth Station? Well, I wanted my next build to be one of Sodor's big stations, and besides the obvious budget and space problems that would come with making something like Knapford Station or Vickerstown Station, I've always liked Tidmouth a bit more than Knapford. Tidmouth is a station that's the most nostalgic for me, as I grew up watching mostly seasons 2 and 3 where Tidmouth was prominently featured. In fact, those were the only seasons Tidmouth was featured in at all, which was always a big disappointment to me. While I was designing this set, I watched a lot of episodes of season 2 and 3, and I also scoured the wiki for any behind the scenes screenshots I could find so I could recreate Tidmouth as accurate as possible to how it was in those seasons. But that process was not without a few hiccups. Eagle-eyed viewers will have already noticed that this set most closely resembles Tidmouth as it appears in Season 3, and this is because of two main reasons. Reason number 1, Season 3 aesthetic wins every time. Reason number 2, the Season 2 Tidmouth set is just a confusing mess. It changes multiple times throughout the season, and it doesn't even stay consistent within a single episode sometimes. Thomas Comes to Breakfast is a great example of this. I thought it would be a great episode reference for designing this set, since Thomas runs all around the Tidmouth set in that episode, but I could not have been more wrong. Let's just take a brief tour of the Tidmouth set as it appears in this episode. First, Thomas puffs out of his shed with Tidmouth on his right, and then he passes by Tidmouth, which is now on his left, and turns away into the yard. Then he teleports back, passing the sheds he started at before finally crashing into the house. This episode ended up being completely useless as a reference when designing Tidmouth, and the same can be said for other episodes of Season 2 as well. Some episodes just have a million straight lines of track directly in front of the station, even all the way up to the buildings and platforms, and this one episode even has Thomas on a line that's on the wrong side of the platform just so he can talk to Birdie in the same shot. Season 3 is luckily a lot more consistent with its Tidmouth set, at least with the station itself. The yards are a whole other problem, but we'll get to that in a future video. Foreshadowing? Anyway, once I had decided the general idea of how my Tidmouth set would be built, it was time to start the track plan. Making the track plan of this Tidmouth set was not an easy process. First, I decided that I would use the whole length of my table, which is about 6 feet or 7 32x32 LEGO base plates. As for the depth, I just stuck to the front half of the table for now, about 2 32x32 base plates deep. The back half would be saved for a possible yard expansion in the future. More foreshadowing? Once the size of the set was decided, I used SCARM to plan out all the track. SCARM has always been my go-to for track plans. The free version gives access to nearly all features with just a limit to the number of track pieces you can add to a layout. I highly recommend it. I do have to mention here that during production of this video, SCARM was discontinued and SCARM 2 was released. I haven't tried SCARM 2 yet, so I can't recommend it myself, but if it's anything like SCARM 1, it should be good. Anyway, the track I'm using is the same as always, Kato Unitrack. Each track piece is almost exactly 3 LEGO studs wide, and the switches space the rails exactly 1 stud apart, making it no challenge to fit Kato Unitrack into the LEGO system. Sections of the track were actually designed at the exact same time as I was working on the build for those sections. I would design a bit of track in SCARM, screenshot the track plan, paste the track plan into Bricklink Studio where I was designing the LEGO, and then build the LEGO on top of it. Then I would do the same in reverse, screenshot the LEGO build, set it as the background in SCARM, and then continue designing the track on top of that. The trickiest part was the curves. The whole build had to be completed and all the track ordered and in hand before I could plan out out the ballast next to the curves. The Lego surface under the track obviously has to be flat, but I wanted the studded ballast to get as close to the tracks as possible. So I had to put down all the curved pieces exactly where they would be in the final build, and then meticulously place studs alongside them in the shape that they made. Then I copied that back into Bricklink Studio, and once that long process was finally done, I could fill in the areas next to the curves and order all the parts for the build. I ordered the parts, but not from Bricklink or Lego.com this time. I ordered the parts from WeBrick, which is a supplier of Go Bricks. Go Bricks is the Lego alternative that a lot of people are turning to these days, with Lego becoming ridiculously expensive. This was my first time using alt bricks, as they're called, and I have to say I was pleasantly surprised with the quality here. I didn't have any quality control issues with any of the parts that I ordered from WeBricks. I highly recommend them. Hey guys, Editing Dan here, and apparently WeBrick is no longer a thing. They have rebranded into BrickWith, but they're not the only supplier of Go Bricks. There are many out there. WeBrick is just the one I happen to use, and it is no longer a thing. But you can find these bricks in many other places, just go looking for them. And by the way, alt bricks do give you the ability to use parts and colors of parts that Lego does not produce themselves, but I did not use any for this build. I kept away from those parts just so that if any of you want to recreate these builds yourselves, you can still do so with official Lego parts. That being said, I do recommend Go Bricks highly from anywhere you can get them. Speaking of building these yourselves, all of the instructions and studio files are on my Patreon, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but for now it's time to go over the first thing I built, and that is the base of the whole project. Every part of this set was built on top of Mills plates. I did this with my last build as well, but I'll just explain it quickly for anyone not familiar. MILS stands for Modular Integrated Landscaping System, and they're basically just an upgrade to the standard Lego base plates. Lego base plates are flimsy and floppy and not easy to pick up without parts falling off. MILS is a simple solution to this. It's just a structure of bricks built on top of standard Lego base plates, with large plates then placed on top of that. The set is then built on top of those large plates. The edges have Technic holes so that the plates can be connected and disconnected in a modular system, making them easy to move and store and much more sturdy than standard Lego base plates. The empty space inside also means that you have plenty of extra space for wiring and other things. Foreshadowing? Okay, that's probably enough about the track and what's happening under the set, so now let's take a look at the set itself. The base plates are not the only part of this build that's modular. Every building, every tree, and every pair of buffers is designed to be easily removable. This is for a few reasons. One reason is that it makes everything easier to store, and another reason is that it helps me get difficult camera shots without certain objects being in the way, because I can just remove them. And most importantly, it means that I can reuse all these buildings on other sets, just like the show crew did. The one thing that can't be modular is obviously the ground, which is the first thing that was built. I did this on my first live stream here on the channel, so shout out to anyone who tuned in for that. The space under the station building is just light gray tiles, nothing fancy. Where it gets interesting is once we leave the station. Season 3 had this unique mix of what looked like sand and ballast, and I really like that look, so I recreated it the best I could using tan and light gray. The distribution here is not totally random. I mixed in more sand the farther away you get from the rails, and also some bigger patches of ballast or sand included sporadically throughout the set. The spaces immediately next to the rails are always studs, while the areas away from the rails have a mix of studs and tiles. This makes it look like the ballast is higher up next to the rails. It also helps a lot that the Kato Unitrack has a built-in road bed as well. I'll go over any other notes about the base as we get to those sections of the build in the main overview. Speaking of which, it's time to place everything on the set to see how it all comes together. We'll start at the farthest end away from the station and make our way back towards it. So without further ado, let's begin with the tunnel. This is the tunnel that appears at the edge of my Tidmouth set. This isn't really accurate because there's no version of Tidmouth that has a tunnel right after the station itself, except for Wonders of Sodor, funny enough. This game came out after I had already finished designing my Tidmouth, so it was fun to look around and compare our different interpretations. In my Tidmouth, I needed this tunnel here because I wanted the tracks to curve off so that they could loop around, allowing me to run trains in a continuous loop. I need this kind of setup for future reviews and for my own enjoyment. Although the tunnel being here isn't strictly based on anything, I did decide that I wanted the tunnel itself to be based on something. I went with this tunnel from Thomas and the Jet Engine just because I like the look of it. For the build, I used reddish brown for the main body with alternating masonry bricks and regular bricks. The only accent color here is a little tan outline. The color in this part of the build will be brought by the various flowers and foliage. The structure of the build is well interlocked and pretty sturdy. It attaches to the base with just a few studs so that it's easily removable, which is the case for all of the other structures as well. The mountain and trees that are supposed to be behind the tunnel portal are missing for now, but they will be added later when the set is expanded. Each side of the tunnel has a retaining wall. Here's the one that goes on the left side. It's a pretty simple build. The shape is done with these taller slope bricks, and the simple arches are just made of plates here. The color is just dark tan, since I want these retaining walls to completely blend into the background as much as possible. There's a couple pieces of greenery attached, but nothing major here, since this particular wall is barely a part of the set anyway. Instead of being in front of the tunnel like in the reference, it goes back here beside the tunnel, covering where the side of the mountain would be. Behind this wall are the tracks that loop around the set, so I had to cover them up somehow, so this retaining wall was just moved back. Having the wall move back like this also opens up the set nicely for filming shots of engines coming out of the tunnel. This is the retaining wall for the right side of the tunnel. It's the same build, but it has a lot more foliage. This side will appear on camera a lot more, so it had to be decorated a lot more than the other side. These trees on top of it here are actually the same design as the rest of the trees that appear throughout the whole set. The last piece of the retaining wall is just this little bit that gets added on the end here where the wall tapers off. Here are the two trees that appear throughout the set. One is just a simple green tree, and the other one is blooming white, based on the trees in my neighborhood, which I'm quite fond of. Several copies of each of these trees are spread across the edges of the entire set, serving as a border. Each copy is constructed mostly identically, but there are some small tweaks to make them somewhat unique. Speaking of foliage, coming out of the tunnel, the tracks curve toward the station, flanked by flowers in purple, orange, and red. All these different colors of flowers give the build a distinct Season 3 to 4 vibe in my view. Also appearing here as we come out of the tunnel and throughout the rest of the set are these telephone poles. I thought about connecting them with string to look like real telephone lines, but there was something that made me reconsider adding string to the set. Now with all these little details in place, let's look at the next major structure as we come out of the tunnel. This is the Goods Shelter. It is a repurposed section of Knapford Station that's used in many sets throughout the classic series. To make sure it would be authentic, I actually started designing a Knapford station just so that I could take this part of that set to use here on the Tidmouth set. It's split into two sections, an end piece and a middle piece. Adding another end piece on the other side would make this the appropriate length for Knapford, but it's not necessary here. The main body of the Goods Shelter is dark tan, just like the retaining walls, with a bit of dark gray at the bottom to represent some weathering. Masonry bricks are again used sporadically throughout. This end here has an old castle-style window, which I don't really love, but it was the only thing that would really work here. The roof sections are easily removable and use ingot pieces for detail, just like I did last time on the small harbor building. The inside of the building only has these little support structures, there's nothing else in here. It attaches to the set at a strange angle, which I really like. It's always nice to have something off-grid in a large LEGO build. This structure being here is based on the scene in Brake Van when Donald reverses into the signal box. You can just barely see it here in the background. As for what's inside this structure once it's placed onto the set, that's where I had to get creative. We never see what's behind the Knapford Goods Shelter whenever it's used as generic set dressing, so I decided to make it into a small parking lot / shaded rest area for the workmen. I am American, so I can't help shoving parking lots in wherever I can. Unfortunately, I don't have any vehicles to put here right now, but there is a bench where the workmen could have a rest while on break. And from that bench, there's this treaded path that goes to a few places. This crossing over the tracks, this other path that I'll come back to later, and the spot for this signal box. It's meant to be the signal box that Donald crashed into in Brake Van, like I mentioned earlier. This signal box is actually my favorite building in the whole set. I think it came together really well, especially the windows. It's very small, just 3 studs wide, but it is tall enough to see all the points and switches that would be changed from here. I based its design on these model reference photos from the wiki. This window in the front was too small for me to add all the panes that it should have, but I was able to get it broken up a little bit by using plates on their sides. I used minifig backpack stack pieces under them for the windowsill. Above the window is the sign that should say Tidmouth, but I still haven't figured out decals, so it doesn't say anything for now. Above that sign, we've got the walkway that wraps around 3 sides of the building, which uses grill pieces for the railing as usual. The end of the balcony has these stairs leading down to the ground level, and the door made with an ingot piece to give it a little bit of texture. I forgot to include a door on the ground level, but then again, so did the original prop. That's why there isn't a door on mine. These big windows in the front are the reason that this is my favorite building on the set. They're built on their side with backpack brackets in the middle to divide them, and by doing that, I was able to get a lot more window panes in this small space than you'd think would be possible. I spent a long time trying to figure out how to get as many panes as I could into a window at this small of a scale, and I have to say that I'm really proud of the result. The roof, which is just made with regular hinge pieces, comes right off all at once so we can see how it works inside. The brackets are wedged in between the windows, then a plate and a tile are placed onto the brackets on the inside, which makes them exactly wide enough that they won't move around in here. The one downside is that this prevents interior lighting from shining through the windows, since the bracket pieces are blocking light coming in from the inside. Placing the signal box onto the set, it looks very nice, but there is one small problem, and that's that the Bachmann, Annie, and Clarabelle don't fit under the balcony because the track raises them up too much. This is a really dumb oversight for me to have made, but it's what happened. I don't have any of the Tomic stuff with me right now, but I do presume that all the vans and coaches and probably Henry from that range would also just not fit under the signal box. It just takes a few extra plates to raise the signal box up a bit and fix that, but I don't have any in the right color right now, so I haven't done that yet. Now that the signal box is on the set, let's use it to take a look at all the tracks here and explain why I decided to include each of them. Of course, there are the 3 mainline tracks, nothing shocking there. There's a single crossover switch between each of them. I considered doing double crossovers, but that leads to too many derailments, so I just did single crossovers. Coming out of the station, the first switch is this one, which you can see in most shots from the front of Tidmouth in Season 3. From this switch, there's another switch with one line going off to where the turntable would be, and another line going off this way. You can just barely see this switch in this shot from tender engines. I decided that this switch would branch off into these 3 lines, which we can also see in tender engines. I know it looks like there's only 2 sidings here since Gordon is on the main line, but we can see a third one behind Duck in this shot. I imagine that these sidings are dual purpose. They can be used either for resting engines to refill on coal and water, or for storing rolling stock. On the opposite side of the main line, we have another switch that branches off into 2 sidings. One is the line that Donald is on when he crashes into the signal box, and the other is the line that we can see behind that one. All of these sidings end in these buffers, which are a very simple build, just 7 pieces. They're low enough for engines' faces to be seen over them, and the buffers of most models line up with them perfectly. They also, being made out of Lego, can be easily rigged for crashes. Also, between these 3 sidings, there's these wooden planks made out of brown plates that serve as a walkway between the tracks, leading back to the signal box. The path that comes out of the wooden crossing leads us into the next set of structures, which make up the small part of the Tidmouth yard that's included in this set. Here's the first build from the small section of Tidmouth yards. It's a very simple little coal box. 2 of these are put onto the set, mimicking this shot of Duck again from tender engines. Another detail taken from this scene is this small crane. This is probably my least favorite part of the set. I don't really love how this thing turned out, but it looks close enough to what it's supposed to be. It goes behind the coal boxes. Next to the coal boxes we have this building, and if you recognize it, that's because this is the small building from the Knapford Harbor set, reused because that's exactly what the show crew did. Since that previous video, I have updated the build a little bit to be more structurally sound. This building goes next to the coal boxes, and across from that is this small blue building. This building is nothing special, just another little background building that will be reused in a lot of sets in the future, and like the small harbor building, it is actually constructed upside down to accommodate the technique that I used for the windows. The roof is removable, but there's nothing interesting inside. Since both of these buildings are built upside down, they don't actually attach to anything and just sit here on the set. Next to them is this small water tower. It's another very simple build that just gets the job done. I couldn't find a decent solution for the hose that didn't look out of scale, so I had to make do with these Technic pieces. The top here is supposed to be covered by a 3x3 plate that covers the whole tower, but I lost it somehow, so the top of the water tower ended up being a little bit undersized for now. It sits on top of this little dirt mound on the set. At the end of the path is this slightly larger office building, seen behind Oliver in Bulgy. I used these model reference photos from the wiki to recreate it. It's not that complicated anywhere, it just uses sideways headlight pieces and brackets for the windows. I do like how this door turned out though, it's a good texture. The roof is also removable like most of the other buildings. Unfortunately, this build turned out to be pretty unstable once I built it, so I'm probably going to have to redesign it a bit later. This building caps off the little yard section of the set, but in front of the white building there is a big lamppost. There's 4 of these in total spread throughout the set, wherever I saw them in episodes or wherever I thought it would make sense for there to be a lamppost. Now with all the little things out of the way, it's time to get to the main event, the big station building you've all been waiting for. The Upper Brendam Station Building. We all of course remember this iconic building as being the ending of Bertie's Chase, but what you might not have known is that you can just barely see it in the background next to Tidmouth in a few shots in Season 3. It was obviously an essential inclusion on my set because of this. This is a pretty small building with a lot of simple details. Technic bricks are used for the windows, modified bricks with plates on the sides are used for the corners for texture, and jumper plates are used to make this small ledge jutting out of the wall between the 2 floors. The doors are done a little differently on each side, and the roof, both parts of it, are again done with ingot pieces like the rest of the set. This isn't the most stable build since much of it was built with jumper plates, but since building it I have since updated the studio files to be a little better. It goes onto the set right here next to where the main station building will go, and next to it I added this little staircase so that people can get up to the door, which is raised since it's supposed to be in front of a station platform. There's also this little bench and this lamp. The back door is still a booby trap. Okay, now let's talk about the main station building, Tidmouth Station. The main Tidmouth building is made up of 9 total sections, so we're gonna have to go over it bit by bit. We'll start with the station platforms. This is Platform 1 of Tidmouth Station. Its design is mostly based on my old Farquhar station build. It's just a simple light gray platform with a white outline and reddish brown bricks used on the bottom. Platform 2 is pretty much the same, just thinner, and with this red plate for the luggage scale, the rest of which is built onto the station building. Both of these platforms are again very useful builds that can be reused on many other sets. They attach to the set with just a couple studs, so they're easily removable. Now we can look at the actual station buildings, starting here with the smaller one. This is one big, solid hunk of Lego that you could probably kill someone with. The bulk of it is of course tan, and the roof is light gray. The build process of these walls is a lot more complicated than it looks. There's 6 windows on each side, which was the main determining factor for how this whole thing would be built. I fully committed to getting 9 sections in each window, and to do this, the insides of the windows are actually just plates and tiles sitting wedged between different pieces of very specific sizes. The whole roof is removable, so we can take a look at the inside and see how it looks. The loose pieces of the window are held in on the inside with clear bricks so that light can pass through the windows, which I'll show off later. Back on the outside, above the windows, there's a simple lining of tiles attached to the side, and looking into the middle of the building, it's hard to see, but there's a door and a ticket counter on each side. Finally, here on this wall, there's the top part of the luggage scale, which you can see in a few shots of Season 3. Putting the building onto the set, things are finally starting to come together. Here's how the luggage scale looks, and we'll also add this little sign that goes on the outside of the station. Here's the other building, which is a lot more interesting than the first one. It's got double tall windows on this side, which I guess means that it's 2 stories on the inside, and single tall windows on the other side. Instead of being connected across the top, these are technically 2 separate buildings, with this big arched roof in the middle. The glass roof here is just done with hinge plates in a simple way, but I ordered the wrong amount, so it ended up looking kinda stupid. Each of the thinner sides of the building have this thinner window design, and the middle between the buildings just has doors, no ticket windows this time. I imagine that you gotta buy the tickets inside the building for this one. The roofs are removable, and again the windows are done in the same way on the inside as they were on the other one. The one thing I dislike about these windows is how they have this one visible stud in the middle. It's easily fixable, but I haven't gotten the parts to do that right now, so I haven't done it. The station sign on this building is built into the side instead of being a separate piece like on the other building. Putting this giant building onto the set, we can see how things are starting to come together even more, and now we can get into the large glass roof on top of Tidmouth Station. And here it is, one section of the large glass roof over Tidmouth Station. This was by far the most difficult part of the entire set to get right, and it actually is the part that I designed first, since the whole thing had to be based around the spacing of this on top of the rails. It did end up being a little bit overscaled in the end compared to the Bachmann-Thomas models, but I'm still happy with how it turned out overall. It's made in two sections. This end part comes off and brings the whole top of the thing with it. You can see that it's all studs on the side construction built up from this end piece and connected by hinge pieces. When designing this, I originally had the top coming out of each end and meeting in the middle, but then it became very prone to snapping in the middle if you held the base the wrong way. Speaking of the base, here is that, and the structure is as thin as I could make it while still being stable. With the supports in the middle, the whole thing ends up being a lot more stable than you'd actually expect. And by the way, like the Knapford Goods Shelter, I designed these roof pieces as pieces of Knapford Station, so they will already be appropriately sized should I ever get around to making that station. Now, how do the roof pieces actually attach to the station? This is another thing that was really difficult to figure out. On the prop, they're basically floating above the main line. I can't do that because Lego bends, and there aren't even any plates that are long enough to cover the gap between the station buildings, so I had to get creative and make this large frame for the roof. Like the individual roof section frames, it's as thin as I could make it while remaining stable, and there's also some lamps on the bottom. It's not actually very stable while being held up like this, but we can see where it shines by putting it onto the set. Each building has a ridge at the end so that this frame can fit cleanly into them, and then we can add the 4 roof sections on top of it. By some miracle, all the parts are held together in such a way that this whole thing does not completely collapse in on itself. It can actually hold a lot more weight than is probably necessary. And with that, the station building itself is finally complete. And here it is in all its glory. There's just one more detail to add to the set now, these retaining walls that go all around the station. They're technically not retaining walls since they're not holding back anything, they're more like security walls keeping pedestrians from running into the yard. Behind this wall, I included what's probably the most unnecessary detail of the whole layout. Besides the trees that can be seen from the other side of the wall, there's a little treaded walking path that goes all the way from the goods shelter to the entrance of Tidmouth. I just figured that this was a place that workmen or trespassers would frequently walk, so a path would naturally form through the nature. It's totally pointless for making videos, it's just here so that this edge of the set is nice and appealing to look at. In front of the station, there's a little more detail here with some various potted plants, pipes, and random boxes. I based these details on shots from James Goes Buzz Buzz. And on the other side, there's a small flower bed and a spot where the road comes closer to the tracks for Bulgy or Birdie to talk to the engines. And that's about it for the details of the Tidmouth set. If you want to build anything you've seen in this video, the studio files and instructions for everything you've seen on this set are all available on my Patreon. I used to not include instructions, but this time I decided to give it a go and I made some instructions for everything. The only things I haven't made instructions for are the base plates, since those are entirely dependent on the track plan you want to go with. I think I made a huge step up in detail with this set. If you look at all 3 of my sets side by side, you can really see the difference. I still think there are ways that I could add more detail to this set, some cars, a footbridge, a red telephone box, but if I had kept on adding more details to the design, I never would have gotten around to actually building the thing. I had to remember to never let perfect be the enemy of good. And with that said, things definitely got a bit out of hand with this set, and I can say with certainty that my next set will not be anywhere near this big. I'm thinking Knapford Crossing, or the Chocolate Factory, or maybe a tree in a field. Something nice and simple. Of course, leave your suggestions in the comments as well, I will be looking at all of them. Speaking of future projects, sorry about this year being so light on uploads, a lot of personal life stuff happened, but that being said, I will be making reviews of every new Bachmann N-Scale Thomas release once they finally come out. And I also have some other exciting ideas for future Thomas videos as well. But anyways, that's going to be about it for this video, so thank you all for watching. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, rate, favorite, share, +1, anything else you can do on YouTube, and I will see you later.